Lesson 32. You continue with the philosophy of the Kleshas, based on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, chapter 2, Sutra 3. Sutra 3 is describing the 5 categories of Kleshas that exist according to Patanjali. The lack of awareness of reality, the sense of egoism or I amness, attractions and repulsions towards objects, and the strong desire for life are the great afflictions or causes of all miseries in life. So Patanjali reduces all misery, all suffering in life to just 5 categories. Starting with ignorance. Then we have ego. Then we have attachment. So you see that Patanjali has a particular way of describing it, but this is simplified what those 5 mean. The next one is hatred. Or anger. And the last one is fear. And he calls it the fear of death. But it encompasses all fear. So these are the 5 kleshas. Now, in what seems to be a little bit a strange twist, the handout then goes into the story of the drill sergeant in the army. And the reason why we go there is because it is a perfect example of how this works. There are movies about the bully sergeant in the army being really nasty to new recruits that are being bussed into the army camp where they were going to be prepared for war. And what you see invariably in those movies, it always goes like this. They're being bussed in. You see a lot of young, cocky, late teenagers, early 20s boys, men, full of brawn, cocky, big mouth. But the drill sergeant knows exactly what he's dealing with. And they may be cocky, they may be full of brawn and full of energy, of course. That's the perfect age for military service. But they can't deal with fear, which is the most important element a good soldier or warrior needs to be able to deal with fear. So they're stripped of their individual clothes, their hair is shaven, they're basically being undone, stripped of all their individual personalities, ego. And the reason why the bully sergeant is bullying, is nasty towards the fresh recruits, is not because he's a bad person. But he knows that if he wants them to survive the war, or at least to increase their chances to survive the war and to come back to their families after they have completed their tour of duty or the war finishes, he needs to enable them to control fear. And he does that by bullying them. So, to be shaped into a warrior, they need to do the obstacle course. They need to do all kinds of very difficult things, especially if you go to the Marines or Commandos, Special Forces. They have a grueling hard training that is very many recruits drop out of those very heavy training programs because they're just not cut out for it. But the bully sergeant, every time when he notices fear in the recruit while being challenged to do something very difficult, psychologically and physically very difficult, he doesn't encourage them by being nice, because that doesn't work. He tries to let them overcome fear by going back to anger or hatred. So that is the bully sergeant. Although he may be a very nice guy in private, his function is to shape invincible warriors. And to do that, he starts by triggering anger in them. So when they need to do a certain obstacle or a certain task that they can't do, they feel paralyzed out of fear, he doesn't give them a shoulder tap and some encouraging words. It doesn't work. He pisses them off by humiliating them. If you're such a pussy, then go back home and go washing dishes in the local fast food restaurant or something. It just pisses them off. And it works. The anger that he then triggers in them makes them put their foot down and say, well, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you who I am and what I got in me. And that is what he needs. And he does that by being nasty, even though he might be a really nice man usually. Why this is important is because to win wars are horrible. You're at the battlefield and bombs are exploding. That's not firecrackers, but it's like 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 times bigger boom. And not only that, left and right your comrades are dying or losing legs, arms, horrible, terrible wounds. And if you're not trained well, you'll just run away. And the last thing that the army needs is soldiers who run away. The army needs soldiers who stay in place, take rational decisions under the pressure of horrible experiences. And that is the task of the bully sergeant, is to create these kind of qualities in the recruits. But it doesn't stay there, because once the bully sergeant has achieved his task, after months of training, grueling, hard training, you then, in those movies, you see invariably, first you see the scenes where behind the barracks they have a fist fight. Then you see, after months of hard training, lots of hardship and tears and sweat and blood maybe also, you see them at the bar drinking a beer together. They have received their beret, their blue or green or red beret. They become an elite warrior, elite soldier. And he then goes one level higher to make them stop hating him. He creates attachment. He knows that they are ready. They're ready to fly out to go to war, but he needs to free them for that. That they don't keep grudges, that they stay stuck in how he trained them. So they end up in the bar, and the drill sergeant has nice things to say about the accomplishments of the recruit, who is now a qualified warrior, and the warrior starts appreciating or expressing the appreciation for the man that he has become as the result of the bully sergeant's behavior. He starts to realize that that was a necessity. So no need to hate or hold grudges. Attachment in itself is also not good. So then the sergeant will basically give the green light to detach. He appeals to the ego of the former recruit, the graduated warrior, by giving them their insignia, their beret, they get all the shows of accomplishment. Is appealing to ego, and they do this in universities too, with the graduation ceremony and the diploma that you receive, and it's to give you a sense of having reached a threshold that you now need to step over and take control and go your own way, out of the protection and the safety of the institution, whether it's the army or the school or whatever it is. And so you have basically reversed the Kleshas from the final station, where most people, if you look at it objectively, most people, all of us basically, live in the condition of fear. Fear determines everything in our lives. It's a basic instinct. And if we're not conscious of that, everything that we do, all the decisions that we make or decline to make, more likely, is because of this last final station of the Kleshas. You can also see with people after being born, they're not instilled with fear. Children, teenagers are fearless. But fear becomes really instilled in us as a misguided element of our upbringing. As long as we are child or teenager in school, we are allowed to just do and play and fool around, as long as we at least do our best a little bit in school. The moment that we graduate and are done with our studies, we then all the time hear, it's time to grow up, have a job, start a career, plan a career, build a career, increase your income, buy a house, get married, have children, etc. It is from that moment on that we start worrying about the future. So all that fearlessness that we possessed as a child, that open mind to just experiment and just do, foolish as it is sometimes, is gone from that moment. That's usually after graduation and being told to grow up and start acting like an adult. So we lose our wonderful colors as a result of this. And we get stuck here. In this process, the Kleshas start with ignorance and evolve. Ignorance leads to ego. Ego leads to attachment. Attachment leads to anger, hatred, and eventually we end up in fear. You see this in relationships also. When you fall in love, you're on a pink cloud, but then ego kicks in. You start asking. First, everything is wonderful, but then ego kicks in, and you see your partner on the phone, and your ego makes you wonder, who the hell is he or she talking to? Or where was he or she last night? Or that's ego. Then, because we become attached to what we have, we don't want to lose it anymore. There are expectations. there are assumptions, and then the hatred comes, the anger comes. That is why we talk about love and hate relationships. Almost all relationships are love and hate, attachment and anger. Because most people are incapable of unconditional love. If love is unconditional, you accept your partner the way they are. You don't put restrictions on them, and you realize that if there is any feeling of suspicion or mistrust, it starts in the first place with your own insecurity. So you let your partner free and you let your partner go, if you can. That is yoga. Yoga suggests that also, unconditional love. If your partner really is doing wrong, it just means you're in the wrong relationship. Because unconditional love is not a one-way street, it has to come from both sides. And in the end, many relationships are stuck in the final stage, fear. So people stay together, the relationship, the romance, the eroticism, the spirit, it has all died. The flame has dimmed, but we stay together because we are afraid of what comes after separation. If you're aware of this, you can enormously improve the way you can enormously improve the relationships that you have. Whether that's a romantic relationship with a partner or with colleagues or with other family members, etc. It makes a huge, huge difference when you become aware of all this. Some of the things that I just explained are covered in some of the sutras that follow. Let's go to Sutra 4. Avidya is the source of those that are mentioned after it, whether they are in the dormant, attenuated, alternating, or expanded condition. Now, the easy part of this sutra is the realization that all misery starts with ignorance. It is because of ignorance that we are not aware of our subconscious functioning. We are not aware of the way that we react based on impulses being triggered. So we always find ourselves in misery. So all misery starts with ignorance. That's the easy part. What follows is, it says, Patanjali said, whether they are in the dormant, attenuated, alternating, or expanded condition. This is about how situations evolve. A situation in a dormant condition is something that the essence is there, the possibility of something happening, the seed is already there, but most people do not realize it yet. As a yogi, however, you become more and more sensitive and conscious, and you anticipate things before they have happened, including situations in which you find yourself, which can, if you don't step in and take control, will evolve according to these 4 steps. A dormant situation is the seed. Something hasn't happened yet, but you feel it actually might. Something might get triggered here in this situation. Attenuated is, the vibration starts to occur. It's still very subtle, but it starts to occur. You feel that something is brewing there. It hasn't manifested fully yet, but the seed has started to grow. The energy is starting to stir, become restless. If still you do not pick up on this, and you just keep engaging in the situation, things start to escalate, alternate. And the final step is the expanded condition, where you have the full-blown situation, full-blown conflict. An example of this is it's an extreme example, but it gives a clear idea of what this is about. You remember that a couple of years ago there was an incident in Itaewon where it was Halloween and 150 people died in a small alley. Hours before people started dying, there were already some people who picked up on what could possibly go wrong. Nothing had gone wrong yet at all. People were in a festive mood, enjoying themselves. We were very busy in the street everywhere. But the logs show that already 3 hours before actually things started happening, there were phone calls. It's the people that have picked up the energy, the vibration of a dormant situation. And the hours that followed between the first calls and the moment that it actually happened, it went through these stages. It went from bad to worse until it was a full-blown situation and it was too late to avoid it. That is those 4 stages. Basically, you can see them evolving in such a disaster that happened there. Most people have not picked up on it until it was too late. But there were some people who had the sensitivity, the consciousness, the foresight to see where the situation was going. Nothing had happened yet, but they thought, it is going in the wrong direction. Several hours before it actually happened. That is what this is about. You could call that one of the cities. Cities being called supernatural and supernatural and supernatural abilities. The cities that we talked about before with reading the Hatha Yoga Pratipika. It's basically increased consciousness and sensitivity. Paranormal, that's the word I was looking for. Supernatural, paranormal. Many people possess them without thinking anything of it, because it is actually quite normal. Sutra 5. Avidya is taking the non-eternal for the eternal, the impure for the pure, evil for good, and non-Atman for Atman respectively. Avidya, that is the first klesha, that is ignorance. Out of ignorance, we take the non-eternal for eternal. That is, in good English, taking things for granted. We go home and our home is comfortable. In the winter there is heat, in the summer there is air conditioning providing cool. And we just turn it on, thinking nothing of it. We go to the kitchen or the bathroom, we turn on the tap, and water streams out of the wall. Even hot water, if we want. And we think nothing of it. Same with electricity, what have you. We take it for granted. We have no idea, we do not realize that there is a whole organization behind it that actually makes that possible. If something occurs, chaos, or something breaks down, which can be mechanical, technical, but it can also be society breaking down in case of conflict or war, there's no heat or cool anymore. There is no water coming from the faucet anymore, leave alone hot water. That is taking the non-eternal for eternal. There are other things, some cute ones maybe. Maybe you remember as a child at family gatherings, you have your mom and dad, you have uncles and aunts, nephews, nieces, and you have your grandparents. And as a child, that's just how it is. As a child, you do not have the insight yet how human beings evolve. You're just a child, and they are just who they are. The moment that you start scratching your head in bewilderment is when an aunt or an uncle calls your dad or your mom by their name. And you say, hey, that is not Annie, that is my mom. And then your uncle says, oh, your mom, that's my sister. And you say, huh? But you are uncle and she is mom. What do you mean she's your sister? And then your mom says to granddad, hey dad. And you say, hey mom, that's not dad, that's granddad. Then your mom said, yeah, but your granddad is my dad. And you get dizzy. As a child, these kind of things are totally new and in the beginning kind of causing shock. That is also taking the non-eternal for eternal. You think this is how it is. I'm a child, my parents, my grandparents, uncles, aunts, and that's how it's always going to be. Then you realize, with time as a child of course, that someday you might become a parent. And you realize that someday you might become really old and become a grandparent. Taking the non-eternal for eternal. Safety, security, peace. We take it for granted. Countries invest huge amounts of money to maintain the peace. And NATO is an organization that when wars escalated and became more and more bloody and deadly, wise people in control of ego, they came together and said, let's just not let this happen anymore in the future. Let's control our egos. Let's not deal with our differences every time with war. Europe has been a battlefield for thousands of years. A bloody battlefield at that. And as technology advanced, wars became more and more deadly and gruesome and violent. And wise people came together and said, let's just solve things in a reasonable way from now on, in a diplomatic way, instead of these eternal wars. And it's one of the most successful alliances in the history of mankind that is still spreading. It's very much yoga. Of course, maybe they've never practiced yoga, but yoga is not yoga. It's life on its own. And when you become conscious and control ego in particular, there are many things that you can do, many things that you can avoid. Reduce the misery that otherwise occurs just whenever a little thing happens. So, peace is also something that, as long as we live in peace, we do not realize that very suddenly it could just end. Like it ended a couple of years ago in Ukraine, when another country just thought it would be a good idea to just invade and take over that whole country. They failed miserably, but we're still in a very bloody conflict now for the past 2.5 years that there is no end in sight yet. That can just happen very easily. Patanjali has an answer to that also, and we will come to that very soon. Now, The sutra also mentions taking the impure for the pure. We have talked about purity of motive. That was the first of the niyamas. Taking the impure for the pure is something that you see happening on a large scale when you have these skillful manipulators in politics that make people believe in lies. And as you can see, what is happening in Europe and America, a large part of the population falls into that trap. And that is taking the impure for the pure. The people that believe the lies believe that that person has no bad intention. They are pure and they're standing up for their interests. While what they're really doing is very selfish and all about grabbing power and grabbing control. It's about 50-50 if you look at it. If you look at the polls, there's about 50% that believe the lies, which is shocking and scary. And there's about 50% that has the insight and the consciousness to realize that what is going on there is fishy, is to say the least, is or could be dangerous in the long term. Taking the impure for the pure is justifying bad behavior. Taking the impure for pure, justifying bad behavior. No, that was not my intention at all. People say cynical things or mean things, and then say, oh no, but that is really not what I meant. It's really what they meant, but they then don't want to take responsibility for basically what they did there, and they will just justify. They're just saying that that was not their intention at all. Taking the evil for good. Yeah, same example actually. If you look at what happened in the Second World War, you had Hitler, who was a very clever manipulator, orator, who held speeches that enthralled people. And people, smart people, intelligent, conscious people saw the evil that was unfolding there. And many people, as a result, especially Jewish people, left Europe if they could afford it. Many other people didn't and ended up in a really bad place as a result of that. And people worshipped the man. Based on emotions, based on manipulations, spreading seeds of hatred and evil, basically leading to one of the biggest atrocities in the history of mankind. Taking the evil for good. There are many examples of this. You know, I smile a little bit now because yesterday I was watching the news in the morning when I got up, 6 o'clock a.m. And the verdict came out. Mr. Trump being found guilty on all 34 charges. I wasn't sure if he actually was going to be found guilty because of the whole thing that has been going on, and they are walking on eggshells not to trigger any uprisings or violence among his admirers. But they did the right thing, and people do take evil for good he's openly proclaiming what he's going to do if he's going to be a president again, with all the retribution and retaliation that he has in mind to harm people. And people don't see that as anything wrong. They see that as him standing up for their rights. Taking evil for good. It's not so good to go into politics, especially the present politics, because people are always divided. But I think smart people can see the same thing that I observe. And the last one is taking non-Atman for Atman. Atman, that is the soul. This is a little bit complicated, because what is the soul? But the soul is really the essence of who we are. Soul consciousness is something talked about a lot in spiritual circles. Soul consciousness. Soul consciousness is part of this process in which we discover the self with a capital S, which is a very natural development in people who generate vital energy that rises up and fuels the crown chakra. But there are many people, the human being, soul consciousness for most people is simply unachievable, because it's very subtle and requires sensitivity to connect with. That sensitivity comes very natural in yoga practitioners, but there are many people who mistake their conditioning based on every experience they went through since they were born, identifications, and they mistake that for soul consciousness. The soul consciousness is very subtle. It's something that you easily connect with in your meditations or in the silence of your asana practice. But it's, for many people, even in spiritual circles, something that they confuse with who they think they are and who they really are. So it's a little bit complicated, but I think you understand what this is about. All right, questions?
What is the difference between capital self and the small s self?
Yeah, that's this. The S with the self with the small s, that is what we see in the mirror. And the identifications with our culture, our family name, everything that we take pride in, our work environment, our job, our career. I am this, I am that. But the capital S, that is Atman, the self with capital S. That is your essence, your true self. That has nothing to do with which country you were born, which culture you grew up, which soccer club or football club you identify with, or rock star or sports star, or it's your true essence. All right. Other questions? Okay, let's have a short break.